It's this,
It's deep.
and you're listening to It's Really That Deep.
We have takes on everything you're watching.
No Other Choice. It is a 2025 South Korean satirical black comedy thriller film, co-written, produced, and directed by the legendary Park Chan-wook. It's based on an American novel called The Axe by Donald Westlake. The film follows a desperate paper industry expert who decides to kill off his competition to be assured of the job that he seeks to maintain his way of life.
So here's the story of No Other Choice. Yeom Soo is an awarded paper industry veteran. He lives happily and lavishly with his wife, their children, and their dogs. There's a buyout from an American company at his paper company, and he's amongst thousands that are suddenly laid off. He promises them that he'll find another job with his stellar resume. Things don't end up being that easy, and he has to work a retail job, and they've had to cut back on their finances. His wife is also now working as a part-time dental assistant. He seeks out a rival paper company and submits his resume only to be humiliated by the line manager. He starts getting basically homicidal thoughts. He feels like he wants to kill him. And ultimately, he decides to start killing off his potential competition for the job. He kills this man who is... Well, no, actually, his wife. Yeah. He tries to kill this man and the wife ends up killing him instead. Yeah. Then he lures some other man to a high when he kills him, hides his body in the car trunk. Then later on, detectives come into his house and notice that they're starting to see some patterns. So Mansu's wife is starting to become suspicious as well. And in fact, his stepson witnesses him disposing of one of the bodies. Mansu then goes to another person who is potential competition's home, where he reconnects with him, he plies him with alcohol, and then he ultimately kills him. His wife actually finds one of the bodies, and she calls him while he is suffocating Seon-chul to death, and she's vaguely sharing her concerns with him. But ultimately, she kind of decides to protect him. Sometime later, Mansu is given the job at the firm where he had been killing off his competition, following their disappearances. But they do inform him that their factory is being fully automated and that he's essentially going to be the only person working there, and he's going to oversee the full automation of the factory. And if the trial works out, there will be no one working there. And he happily does it, basically. The detective visits their house again, and basically he's gotten an alibi from the wife of one of the people he killed. As Mansu leaves for the first day, the end of the film, you see that essentially the family has been reinstated back to their privileged and somewhat happy lifestyle. And the final thing you see is Mansu celebrating his new job alone at the factory that is now run by machines. D was No Other Choice, good, bad, or mid?
No Other Choice was good. I really enjoyed it. It was my most anticipated film for London Film Festival. I would say it's one of my joint favourites. I would say it met my expectations. I just think that a lot of the conversation hyping it up, saying it's the new Parasite, wasn't helpful, which I'll get into. Des, was No Other Choice good, bad, or mid?
Mid. I was bored watching it.
Wow.
This is going to sound so crazy, but I think I have a serious problem with a lot of these Korean films that are trying to address capitalism in this way. I'm just always bored by them. I also didn't like Parasite, and I don't like Squid Game. I just find all of them kind of boring. I don't think it's a technically poorly made film. I actually think it's made very well. But I was bored. It didn't show me anything I've never thought of before. And very importantly, I thought it was too long. But I feel that way about almost everything I watch.
Okay.
I didn't hate it though. Also, I think I also add a huge caveat that I was genuinely not in the best state of mind when I was watching this film. So I think it's one that maybe might benefit from a rewatch for me.
Okay, so regarding themes, obviously the main theme for this film is capitalism and how people respond to the pressures of capitalism. What did you think about how the film handled that?
All I was thinking about was myself and all my friends, because this year was the year of unemployed girl summer for a lot of us. A lot of my friends suddenly found themselves in unemployment. It's tough out here in these streets. And I was thinking about all the jokes, sarcastic comments we've made about how far we're going to be pushed. I don't think any of us we had even gotten to the point of joking about killing off the competition. But when I was watching the film, I was like, Lord, how many people do I know that are just a couple of steps away from this?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of how it deals with capitalism, again, I just wasn't gagged by what it's trying to say. Maybe I've just seen this message too much time that it's tough working in this capitalist hellscape that we're in. It is. And I like the fact that we have lots of creatives addressing this, and this is not something that we're all choosing to swallow and just accept for what it is. I get it, but I'm just waiting to feel more excited by how these stories are told. I think another big problem I'm having with these films is that they're very male-centered.
Yes,
and the male experience under capitalism is fundamentally different from how women are socialized. And I think that's also what's starting to bore me.
So this movie was one of like 5 movies I watched at the London Film Festival that was focused on this story about daddy has to go to work and daddy's struggling under capitalism. And, you know, if I think about the other films I watched at the film festival that did this, that includes My Father's Shadow, Sentimental Value, Black is Beautiful, Secret Agent, and Hamnet as well. Yeah, basically Hamnet, like, it was going on for a bit too long. Now, of course, I'm the one choosing which films I watch, so I have to take responsibility there. But as you just said, I can't take it seriously when in every single case, every single one of those movies refuses to speak to, including this movie, by the way, refuses to speak to what that means when a man is not providing and you're not even picking up the pieces when it comes to the domestic work. Understand that you're putting a ridiculous amount of pressure on a female partner somewhere. At least with Black is Beautiful, they addressed it, which is the reason why I gave them credit for that, right? But every single one of those other movies, all of which are made by men, it's like they just see it as a given that, oh, you know, it's her job anyway. She has to go and stay home and take care of the kids. I have to go to work. I'm struggling. So I agree with you on all of that. And that's the reason why I can't give this movie like 10 out of 10. Like, I can't, because it was bugging me. And even like some of the female characters in this movie, there was something about them, especially the wife, where ultimately she's facing the brunt of her husband's failure to get a job, right? She has to go back to work, which is, you know, there's a whole song and dance about, oh, she has to get a part-time job. Most women work. Get over it. Like, I don't know what's wrong with these film directors. Get over it. Most women work.
There is a fetishization of depicting women who don't work, even though that's not representative of the real life working class, especially women of color, which is also extra strange because the working class is particularly female and, you know, disproportionately people of color. And there's also this like fetishistic interest in depicting suffering women without actually showing their interiority. And actually, it's not actually showing the interiority of what's going on in their actual heads. Where I'm watching them and I'm like, you've presented this character to me, but I spent 2 hours with them and I actually have no idea why they are making the decisions that they're making.
It's the main wife who I really can't stand, because we can see that she's basically a man's fantasy woman. This is a woman who's going to stay with you. You know, you lost your job. You're hiding about it as well. Let's not forget that. He wasn't telling the truth. He was hiding, waiting for the house to get repossessed before he tells her. She finds out. She doesn't even get angry. Then he loses his job. She just suddenly solves all the problems. He doesn't help her at all. She makes all the hard decisions. She tells the kids. And then on top of it, she doesn't even cheat. She goes to get a job. There's a fine man there and she doesn't cheat. Like, I wanted her to at least cheat. Do something. Show me that you're mad.
Let me give you a hot take. As I was watching this character and how she was interacting with her husband, all I could think about is a Young Miami lyric that I applied when Didi's court case was happening. Where Young Miami said, "I'll never cheat on you, daddy. I'll hide a brick for you, daddy." And all I could think about is, it's really giving ride or die narrative, which is a fantasy, a male fantasy.
But in the film's defense, we have another wife in this film.
That's the opposite of a ride or die.
Because if it wasn't for that wife, I would have had a very different opinion about this film. In the film's defense, there's another character called Lee Byung-hun, played by Yeom Hye-ran. And what I liked about her is she's the complete opposite of Mansu's wife. She does what she wants to do. Her partner lost his job. He's refusing to shower. He's an alcoholic now. Okay, no problem. You do you. When you're going out to go find a new job, me and my hot boy, we're going to be inside. That's what she was doing. And obviously when he, you know, when she finally kills him, right, she barely mourns, well, she doesn't mourn him at all. And then she takes the money to go hang out with the hot guy again. At least we had that. If we didn't have that, I would have been really, really upset with this movie, because it's like, you just want women to be brutalized by men because men are being brutalized by capitalism and you want us to say nothing about it. And I would have been disappointed in this director if he did that.
Fair enough. I like that storyline too. I didn't hate the movie. It didn't feel innovative to me. But I get what you said. I agree. That character and that arc creates balance.
Yeah. So I do agree with your takes that, look, it's not necessarily innovative. It's not necessarily saying anything completely different. I do think that the ending is worth talking about, because I think that that's where the message really is. I don't think this movie has anything to say until it gets to the end. Until you get to the end, it's just showing you what it's like to survive under capitalism. There are some interesting commentaries in there about what it is to be a man under capitalism and under patriarchy as well. A lot of the men that we see in the film, they've very much internalized patriarchal gender norms, and they feel additional pressure when they lose their jobs because they are expected to provide for their families. But again, I can't take that fully seriously because the women are still low-key providing. But anyway.
It also gives a bit of like the trap of seeking external validation continuously.
Yes. One thing I will say though is I've never experienced like unwanted unemployment. But even in my experiences with work, I have done a lot of work to make sure that I'm decoupling my sense of self, my sense of worth from a job. And I think this film does have something to say about that. It doesn't have much to say, but it has something to say, and I enjoyed it.
I agree with you in real life, and actually I think this is part of my problem with films like this and Parasite. You see, what you just described, I actually haven't properly seen that depicted on screen when it comes to women, ever. Even though in my real life, the people I know who have the healthiest attitude to exactly what you described are a lot of the women I surround myself with. Mm-hmm. These post-girl boss middle management women, right? I've never really seen that depicted properly. They're either showing the suffering, domesticated woman or the good luck babe, Emma Stone Begonia woman, and very little in between in a very interesting way. And I know that a lot of the women I surround myself with exist outside of the norm. I know, but it's just a bit, it gets tiring for me. I'm like, damn, when do I get to see this a bit?
Like, do you think that's because of patriarchy in the sense that, do you think there's a slight, tiny slither of privilege that we have in the sense that as women, we are not expected to make our work, our personality. And that's the reason why the girl boss had to be defined that way, because we had to provide language to describe the women who are making their work, their personality.
I wouldn't use the word privilege, but I agree that there is a categorization that we've always sat in that means that, like you said, you need to separate out the definition of that kind of woman. But again, I'm talking about within the world of this kind of prestige film though. So whilst in real life, I get what you're saying, like the girl boss is still actually, statistically speaking, the outlier in real life. Yeah. I think in film she's overrepresented.
Agreed.
Either she's overrepresented or the super, I don't know the correct word to describe it, these kind of women that we see constantly depicted as the wives and the girlfriends of the protagonists in prestige role. But just think about Die My Love. Think about so many of the films we've watched, right? And I'm not saying these kind of women don't exist, but it's just like, are you guys not tired of this same thing over and over again? As in women who are kind of, not in a disrespectful way, but like wishy-washy when it comes to what they do with their life in terms of career, or? Which I have no problem with. God knows I'm kind of wishy-washy right now. Yeah. But what I'm saying is either the, like you said, the people that completely center their identity, like the narratives are about women either having a value in themselves based on if they're working or not, and that can be two extremes. It can be either the super girl boss thing, or it can be I don't work and I don't have a career, so what is my purpose? Do you understand what I'm saying? Whereas in my real life, the girlies I talk to would never have that train of thought in either direction. And I understand that we are not necessarily representative. I get that, of the average woman. I understand. But this is an opinion and a perspective that is increasingly growing and has been increasingly growing in the last 5 years. So to me, that's actually a more interesting, a more progressive, a more anti-capitalist way of making commentary in 2025 than what I'm still seeing a lot of these people doing. And I think that's why I kind of struggle to with the reception of these kind of films as something transgressive. And I'm like, are you though?
No, this film isn't transgressive. Definitely not when it comes to gender.
But also, on the flip end, not every piece of art has to turn upside down your entire world view of the world. So I know I'm being a bit harsh. And that's the reason why I do give it some credit. So while I agree with you, this movie is not transgressive when it comes to capitalism, it's not transgressive when it comes to gender.
one thing I do like seeing depicted again and again, and I like to see it depicted repeatedly because it's something that defines all of our lives, whether you work or not, is the way how under capitalism we're also fragile. I like seeing how one event, which is the loss of a job, snowballs into this disaster chaos storyline where this man who is otherwise, quote unquote successful, he has everything that everybody wants. He has the house, he has the beautiful wife, he has the kids, his wife is going to play tennis, she doesn't have to work, all of this stuff. He goes from being a stand-up, quote unquote, family man to being a criminal, to literally listing people out to go and kill them, burying people in his backyard, potentially losing his house, potentially losing his dogs. Like, I think it's important for all of us to understand how fragile it makes all of us, and also our intimate relationships, our interpersonal relationships, our family relationships. Because if your family life is set up in a way where, well, everybody's happy because we have XYZ money or we have XYZ income, then you need to understand what happens if that income doesn't exist anymore, right? And I did enjoy that.
I did, and actually I felt like I should have loved it even more because it's something I'm always railing against the super wealthy people from my personal background. I'm like, you guys are like delusional about like how fleeting all of this is and what it actually means to survive, and how your parents' money is not actually your money, and you need to step, like, I have lots of problems with the way people from my background approach the concept of having financial privilege. So I wish it had hit me more. It didn't, but I think it was technically well done. I do want to talk one last thing about capitalism, and you had alluded to it before with the end, the automation, which is, I assume, also kind of a bit of a commentary on AI, right? Yeah. They're using mechanical automation in this case, but in 2025, anything you do, you're also making reference to AI taking our jobs and stuff like that. All I can say about that is, as I saw that last shot of the robots moving around, all I could think about was Baby Girl from last year and how I wish I was watching Baby Girl instead, one of the greatest films ever made, Times Film of the Year, which is, very importantly, the greatest film ever made about an AI robot, since, as of course we all know, Harris Dickinson's character in that film is a robot from Japan.
No, we don't all know.
Yes,
we don't all know that. But on that subject, yeah, for me, the film doesn't have much to say until we get to that scene. What I found really, like, interesting is we've obviously just gone on this massive journey with this man who's now killed multiple people. He's somehow managed to get away with it. His family life is back to normal. He's all happy, right? And he feels like smug because he's the last man standing, right? Literally, he's the last man standing in the factory. He's the only person running the floor while the bots are doing all the work, right? What he doesn't realize is he's next. Your job's going next.
So this is kind of what I was struggling with, because how does he not realize? And this is what I was struggling to wrap my head around. If the point they're trying to make with that ending, which I agree with you, is that, like, you might celebrate that you won. You beat all your competition, but guess what? The bigger competition that you will certainly lose is in the horizon.
Yeah.
I get that, but I'm like, how does the character not get that? It's one thing if he gets that and he still chooses to participate in the system, but for me to believe he can't comprehend that, I'm just like, so are you a dunce?
Respectfully, under capitalism, a lot of us are dunce, and we have to be dunce to survive, because
your delusion is necessary.
Yeah, you're forced into short-term thinking. So he doesn't have time to worry about 10 years down the line. He almost lost his house.
10 years? Maybe
5
6
years.
months.
6 months, yeah. He doesn't have time to worry about that because he almost lost his house. His progeny child can't do her violin lesson anymore. His dogs got sold off. He has to fix them now. And I think that's...
dogs got sold off.
I do think there's some commentary in there about, like, this idea of the male provider, or whoever it is, the provider, right? It's such a flawed concept because everyone is just one person, right? You're just one job loss away. You're just one business failure away from collapse, right? So it doesn't really make sense for you to put all of this pressure on one person, because when you do, these are the sorts of things that can happen. They have to think short term. He was trying to lie to his wife because he's convinced that he could get a new job in 3 months, and then when it doesn't happen, he just takes things day by day. He's trying to survive. That's what capitalism does to us.
Okay, I can accept that.
Yeah.
I can accept that. Characters do need to be kind of dumb for the story to make its point sometimes. I get it. And like you said, a lot of people are dumb under capitalism, or choose to be dumb rather than face their despair. So I get
Yeah.
it. I get it.
One thing I did want to highlight with this movie, and one of the reasons why, even despite my criticisms of it, I really did enjoy it and it's one of my favorites, is because of one particular scene. And watching it in the cinema it was just such an interesting experience. It's that scene where Mansu goes to do the first kill and he's in the house and he cranks the music up to an obnoxious level. And in the cinema, I was literally like, have they made a mistake? Is the music supposed to be this loud? It was like basically uncomfortable for me. So I was a bit irritated when the scene starts, but then it just descends into chaos where he pulls the gun on the guy. I think he's got like 4 different gloves on the gun. The victim is there looking confused. His wife comes in, they start wrestling on the ground. I'm someone that has a very strong like mental dialogue. I always have a mental dialogue going on at any particular point. That scene completely silenced my brain. I was just so shocked. I couldn't believe what was going on. I found it absolutely hilarious. I do find the film quite funny anyway. But that particular scene worked so well for me. It's one of my favourite scenes this year. I want to rewatch just to watch the scene all over again. But I want to experience it in the cinema again because honestly, it was perfect. I loved it.
I didn't experience it in the cinema, and I experienced this film very like overwhelmed and exhausted, which I think is a pity because I think some of those lighter moments of the film are supposed to hit you hard in that way.
I can't give this film 10 out of 10. 1, because of the handling of gender, and 2, because I think it took too damn long to get to the first kill and to get through it. And then after we got to that, they rushed through the second and third kill. I was just like, what's going on, guys?
What's going on with these filmmakers and their pacing? I thought from the way this film was described that he was going to run through like 10 people in 1 hour. 1 hour in, he hadn't killed anybody.
Nobody.
I was like, can we get things moving? D, what would you rate No Other Choice out of 10?
I give No Other Choice 7.5 out of 10. I would love to give this movie a 10 out of 10 because it was a great cinema experience. It had me laughing, but I just can't get past this idea that Daddy had to go to work and Daddy's so stressed under capitalism while not addressing what Mum is going through. And to make things worse in this film, like they really have nothing to say about what the wife went through. She's just there with, a perky smile and just willing to deal with it all, and she never does anything wrong. So it's clearly, a woman character written by a man. Having said that, I love the scene where Mansu goes to kill the first victim and the music is cranked to an obnoxiously loud level. He's got multiple gloves over a gun. It's just very chaotic. People are rolling around. I loved it. It's probably one of my favourite scenes in this year. I'm a big fan of Korean critiques of capitalism. I loved Parasite. I love Squid Game. This is up there with those for me as well. I really love the ending. I felt that the ending was a proper hardcore critique of our lead character Mansu, and it's basically saying, he's worked so hard to beat everyone out, and now he's the best employee, he's gotten the job, he's getting his income again, but he doesn't realize that AI is on the horizon, technology will be coming for that job anyway.
It's not your job to keep, babes.
Yeah. What would you rate No Other Choice out of 10?
I gave No Other Choice a 5 out of 10. It is technically very well made and it actually has some really cool shots. I like that moment, which I've seen a lot of people talking about, when Mansu and Miri are speaking on the phone as he's trying to dispose of a body and you get a bit of a split screen situation. Things like that. Very pretty film. The film was not transgressive, thought-provoking to me personally. I will say, as I was watching Miri be the ride or die for her man, all I could think about was Young Miami's lyric, "I'll never cheat on you, daddy. I'll hide a brick for you, daddy." And that really almost sums up everything I could say about this film. I will note that as we get to the end, where we see basically automation is about to replace him, all I could think about is one of my ironic favorite films from last year, Baby Girl, which of course is also about a robot. Now we're talking It Was Just an Accident, a 2025 thriller film written and directed by the legendary Iranian director Jafar Panahi. The film is a co-production between Iran, France, and Luxembourg. It follows a group of former Iranian political prisoners who face the question of whether or not to exact revenge on their tormentor. Panahi is critical of the Iranian government and has been imprisoned several times. He made the film without official filming permission from the Iranian authorities.
The film starts off with a man in a car with his wife and child. The car later breaks down and they have to stop at a mechanic to get some help. It's late at night. And in the mechanic, we see Vahid, and he immediately notices the sound of the man's prosthetic leg. So his leg makes a very squeaky sound, and Vahid immediately recognizes that. We don't know why, but we do see that Vahid is very, he becomes obsessed about following the man and understanding who he is. And then we see Vahid basically kidnap him, beat him, load him into a car, and from there the entire kind of narrative plays out. So we then go on a Honora style chase where he collects a bunch of other people who he knows, and he tells them that he's been able to capture someone who he believes is Egbal. We then realize that this man potentially is someone who used to work for the regime, and he potentially is quite an abusive man. We see them trying to work out whether this man is actually Egbal, because of course the man, he's pleading for his life. He's saying, I'm not him, please let me go, I would never do anything like this. And he's very convincing. It goes on for a while, to be honest, where the characters are telling us what they experienced under Egbal or what they experienced under the regime. And then finally, they get a call from the man's daughter, and the daughter tells them that actually, the mom has passed out, and the mother was pregnant, by the way, she was pregnant with a son. She has to go to hospital, I believe, to have the baby. And so we see the scene where this collection of the man's enemies potentially are going to help his wife deliver the baby. They pay for it and everything. And then from there, the film starts to wrap up, and they carry the man to a deserted area, and Vahid and Shiva, who was someone else who was oppressed by the regime, they confront him in a deserted area at night. And there's finally a confession, and it was Egbal this whole time. Initially, he pretends that he's a tough guy, he doesn't really care about what he did, but then he says that actually because of his experiences, he joined the regime to have some sort of power ultimately. The film builds up to this point in time because we think, okay, they're going to finally handle him, he's going to get what's coming to him, but actually they decide to let him go. And they have a discussion about the fact that it's probably not worth it for them to harm him physically. And then the film has a very interesting end scene where we leave that kind of climax of the film and we go back to Fahid, who's helping his family have some sort of family function. And the camera zooms in on the back of his head and he stands still because, of course, he can hear the squeaking again. And that's how the film wraps up. It was just an accident, good, bad, or mid?
Mid. I didn't hate it, but it almost felt like I was watching someone retelling a story to me on their YouTube channel for 2 hours. I watched it and I was like, okay, that was fine, I guess. And I moved on, and I haven't really thought about it since. I'm so fascinated that this film has moved so many people so strongly.
So I would say that the film is good to mid. I think it has, what I liked about it is, number one, it made me question myself. So, while the kind of build-up is happening, I was waiting for someone to at least deck this guy, give him a slap in the face, give him, quick 1-2, let's handle this guy. And it never happens, and I was really frustrated about it. And then I realized, the film is a little bit preachy at the end, to be honest, about how revenge may not be worth it, right? And it's very easy for me to sit within the comfort of my home, and I'm not under an oppressive regime like that. It's very easy for me to root for violence. But the harsh reality is when you live in a country, with an oppressive regime like that, even if you were to get revenge, it doesn't stop there, right? And I really like that. The ending really moved me, and that final ending scene I found to be excellent.
Following up on what you just said, in terms of you thinking about revenge and cycles of revenge, I would connect that to the theme of mercy. And what does it actually mean to be merciful? And are you a bigger man, quote unquote, to grant someone mercy? And is mercy sometimes a dangerous thing? Because at the end of the movie, right, the implication is Egbal is coming back to his house, potentially with more threatening forces. And he's not just coming for him, he's coming potentially for his entire family, vulnerable people. Or I guess you could maybe interpret it as he's grateful for the mercy he showed him for some reason, and then he's showing up in his house, considering
exactly.
he essentially saved the life of his wife and his child. Based on how I know how the real world works, I think I'm too cynical to interpret that ending as that, but I know the ending wants you to consider that might be what's happening. In terms of just general handling of how the different characters are responding to their rage at this character, I did like that. In fact, my single favorite thing about this film is Muhammad Ali El Yasmir's performance as Hamid. He's the one that's really, really, absolutely riled up at the existence of this person. He's not interested in any form of gentleness, forgiveness, mercy. And the scene where he realizes that he's the person they have in this car, they are all having to pull him away and he's screaming. I really thought the actor really tapped into something real there, like I felt it. So I really enjoyed that. But I also enjoyed the fact that our main character is also just a more gentle spirited person, and you're seeing that spectrum of how these repressed people are handling their oppressor. And there's the parallel that in real life, all these actors that are doing this are risking themselves by making this film. Exactly. So I enjoyed seeing how they were all interpreting how they should respond to their own oppression. Like you alluded to, I do think it gets heavy-handed towards the end when he finally reveals himself who they are, and they're literally screaming at each other, "You are a bad person. You did this to me. Do you know how evil that is? I am good, unlike you, evil." And I'm just like,
So the thing is, like, if anything, what I find to be heavy-handed was the whole message, right? I think the director wants us to understand that revenge is not always the best course, right? I found that to be heavy-handed. When I was first watching it, I agreed with you. I was like, well, this is very exposition heavy. But as the scene goes on, like you're alluding to, I felt that the actors were tapping into something. My favorite performance in this film was from Mariam Afshari. I found her to be completely captivating, and I really enjoyed seeing a different presentation of women in this film as well. I think this film actually does a really good job of depicting women, to be honest, and the different ways that women can show up in this society. What I loved about her during that kind of climax scene where she's confronting Egbal is I really do feel like she tapped into something personal. Even though it's very exposition heavy and it's very dialogue heavy, it's very text heavy, the emotion she's able to convey really did convince me, more so than the performance from the actor who's playing Fahid. So I do understand the critique about that scene, but I think it still landed with me, especially because I understood that ultimately this is also Jafar Panari speaking to us as well. And he's coming through this scene, so I did appreciate it. I will say it's not very easy to tackle topics like this and make them humorous. It's a very serious topic, and yet I found the film to be hilarious. I was laughing a lot. It also reminded me in many ways of Anora, like I alluded to before, and you have that very long chase sequence, which to be honest does go on for a bit too long for me, but I did still find it funny. And like you said, I enjoyed seeing the way how different characters were responding to the oppression they're experiencing. There were also some nuances here about ethnicities. So when I did some digging, apparently Vahid, he's Azerbaijani, which I didn't know. I didn't pick up on it through the movie. One of the things I loved the most about Anora was the way how we got to see an insight into how Armenian and Russian immigrants in America interact with each other. And I would have liked to see whether there was a similar theme here. And we got to see some exploration of how Azerbaijani people fit in within the wider scope of life in Tehran. I really enjoyed seeing different depictions of what it means to be a woman responding to this oppressive violence, right? So we have the mother in the very first scene, so Egbal's wife, and we can see that unlike the other women in the film, she's wearing a head covering. And then we see Shiva, who is very much dressed as a modern woman. She has short hair, she's not covering her hair, she's wearing what some people may feel are slightly masculine clothes. And then of course we also have Goli, who's actually taking pictures for her wedding day, and she's getting ready to get married. She's wearing her wedding dress. So it was nice to see different ways how women can show up in this community and different ways how they respond as well. Because we have Shiva, who's potentially more measured, and then we have Goli, who's more, let's say she's more boisterous. And then we find out, of course, that maybe there's a reason for that, because it seems that she may have been assaulted by Egbal or someone in the regime. My favorite part of the movie, though, is the ending. I found the ending to be incredible because it comes not long after the climatic scene where we finally get to confront Egbal. We've confirmed that it's him. He's admitted it. He's admitted all the atrocious things that he did. And we see that they let him go. So, of course, that means that he could come back with the regime, or maybe he's still going to haunt them in some way, unfortunately. And that's a choice they've deliberately made. And I think just hearing the squeakiness of his leg and how the film cuts immediately, I just found it to be an excellent ending. And I had so many questions about where do we go from here? What's going to happen to Vahid now? What's going to happen to Shiva now? Are they safe? And I guess that's the point, right? Is to let you know that regardless of what choice they made, really, this trauma would have still been over them, whether Egbal was alive or not.
I like the ending. I was kind of confused about it, and then when I realized what they were doing, I was like, oh, okay, cute.
Des, how would you rate It Was Just an Accident out of 10?
It's a 6 out of 10. It's very technically well produced. I thought the acting was very good. In particular, I really, really enjoyed Muhammad El Yasmir's acting. I enjoyed how it made me reflect a bit about how we give people grace or don't give them grace. But ultimately, to me, the film is not anything that I've never seen before. So I'm kind of a bit bewildered as to why it's the favorite for Best Picture and how it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. I just thought it was okay. I even think other Panahi films are more interesting. So I feel like I'm missing something with this film. I just thought it was okay. Like it was an okay three star out of 5 film for me.
So I would give It Was Just an Accident 6 out of 10 as well. I really did enjoy this movie in the cinema. It had me cracking up. But it, of course, at the core is a very serious story and it's a very serious message. And the message did land with me because towards the climax of the movie, I was hoping that people were going to be violent with Egbal. I was waiting for it to happen. And I was actually disappointed when it didn't happen. But I did understand the message, which is that, listen, when you're under an oppressive regime like that, sometimes revenge is not the best path, actually. I really enjoyed the acting from Mariam Afshari as the photographer. I found her acting, especially during the climax scene, to be very, very convincing. I really understood the pain of that character, and I suspect that either she was tapping into something personal or maybe the direction from Jafar Panahi was coming in here. But it really, really worked for me. I found the film to be very similar to Anora, and just like Anora, it has a very long chase scene, which I really enjoyed. It's very funny, and we get to see how different people are responding to an oppressive force ultimately. In terms of the things that I didn't necessarily like, I did find that the film meandered at times. So especially during the chase scene, I found that to be quite drawn out at times, to be honest. The climax scene, you can say that it's quite exposition heavy, but I do think that's probably the point. Another thing is, at times, it does feel like it's a play. That's not necessarily a critique all the time, but I think in this film it does come across quite clunky. It does feel at times like, well, I say this and then you say that, and it does go on for a while. Having said all of that, I do understand that this film was made under quite severe circumstances. So I think given the circumstances under which the film was made, the whole team has done an incredibly good job. I'm just rating it to be consistent with other films, I guess. Next up is Testament of Anne Lee. This movie was the hardest ticket for me to obtain at the London Film Festival. I literally had to fight for this ticket. Like normally with the press screenings, you could get a last minute ticket, but I literally couldn't with this one. I had to go begging to BFI to get a ticket. And even though my thoughts on this movie are mixed, I'm so glad I did. So let me get into it. Testament of Anne Lee is directed by Mona Fassvold, who worked on The Brutalist last year with her partner Brady Corbet.
Masterpiece of a movie.
It's essentially a period historical drama that centers on a very interesting character, a real life woman called Anne Lee, who is from Manchester. Right off the bat, I loved hearing Northern British accents on the big screen. There's a big problem in the UK where so much of British media is dominated by people with Southern accents. I have a Southern accent, so it was nice to see a Mancunian accent on the big screen, although I do think that Amanda Seyfried's accent was questionable.
I was just about to say, I hope you're not telling me that Amanda Seyfried was doing a Northern British accent in this film.
Oh yeah, she was.
Oh, interesting.
But it's not really her accent I'm pressed about. It's the rest of the cast. I thought they did a better job. So we meet Anne Lee as a young child, and she gets exposed to her parents having sex quite early on. And she finds it really repulsive, and she basically confronts her father in quite a funny scene. It shouldn't be funny, but I found it hilarious. She confronts her father and says, "I know what you do to my mom at nighttime." And the dad punishes her, basically. He slaps her on her hands, right? And we also see that she's a very hardworking young woman. She's very meticulous. And when she grows up, she marries Abraham Standrin. And this man, he seems quite selfish. You know, he's just looking for someone, a wife, to be a placeholder and do what he wants her to do, basically. And the movie shows us that they have quite a formulaic and repetitive sex life. And she goes on to have 4 pregnancies, all of which end in stillbirth. So after going through all of this, she's, you know, obviously not doing very well mentally. And I believe her husband or somebody sentences her to a women's asylum or hospital slash prison. And she's being brutalized, she's starving herself, she's really not doing well. And then when she's finally released, she finds solace in a religious sect called the Shakers. So this is a subset of the Quakers, and they are known for having a very physical form of worship. So they do a lot of like patting their chests and these sorts of eccentric movements. And
Sounds like Nigerians.
That's a very important thing that you just said. I'll come back to it. Yeah, so they're doing all of this physical movement, chanting and all this stuff. And all I can think is, I know the movie wants me to think that this is so crazy, but I'm a Caribbean person. Like, this is what I see when I used to go to church. So there's nothing crazy about it, but whatever, I'll take it. And yeah, so she finds solace in the Shakers. And then suddenly, remember all of the sexual trauma that she's gone through? Anne Lee suddenly claims to have a divine vision where she says that sexual intimacy is the biggest sin. And she attributes this to like the Adam and Eve story. And she says the only way you can become holy is through abstinence. And that's how you become close to God. And somehow,
even if you're married.
Yeah, that's very important. Even if you're married. Okay. And somehow she's able to convince a decent chunk of the Quakers, and she becomes known as Mother Anne and is very much respected as a female preacher in 1700s England. So obviously this doesn't go unchecked. People realize what's going on and she starts to be persecuted. She is arrested, she's brutalized, all of this stuff. And she suddenly decides that, you know what, I have a message that I need to spread and I'm going to take it to America. And so she gathers her loyal followers, who includes her brother. She has a really, really strong relationship with her brother in this movie, who is an undercover gay man, by the way. And they go...
Hold on. Why did you say undercover like that?
Oh, because in the movie, they show us the brother in bed with a man, and he never comes out fully. And
does the sister know?
I don't think she does, you know. And also, because of the theme here, which is about being abstinent, he doesn't really have to, right? If he's not having sex, he doesn't really have to expose it to anyone. I also think the brother storyline is there to show us the ideas of shame around sex for both characters, right? And maybe this is something that bonds them.
Gotcha.
So they go to America, and what I loved about these sequences when they get there is we really get to see how good of a leader Anne Lee is. So, yes, she's this eccentric person. Yes, she's got this interesting idea about sex, but she's an excellent leader. We see her build a community from scratch. We see her negotiating with indigenous people to get land. I don't know if that's historically accurate or not, but that's what we see in the movie. We see her directing her brother to go and find followers, which he does. And long story short, it grows into a really bustling community of Shakers in the 1700s with a female preacher in America. So at this point, my mind is just blowing. And I think one thing that I really like about this part of the movie is Mona Fastford really demonstrates to us how the Shakers were a powerhouse when it comes to architectural design and interior design. Because all I could think was, these are some beautiful, beautiful shots of the properties and stuff. I was wondering if it was just some directorial flair, but it's not. I did some digging and it's all like, that's how they used to design their properties. In terms of what happens next, her settlement grows very quickly and she starts expanding across different towns. So she literally travels across America, building different types of Shaker communities with quite a lot of success, until, of course, the police come knocking because we can't have a female preacher, and they burn the town she was living in at that time, to the ground. They beat her to death along with her brother. Testament of Anne Lee is no perfect movie, but what I loved about it was, one, they introduced me to this fascinating woman who I've now spent hours researching since watching the movie. Like, I'm obsessed with her story. Two, I read this film as a very queer film, and I'm not even talking about the brother. I'm talking about Anne Lee.
Oh.
I feel like
ace queer or sapphic
ace queer. No. But actually, some people read it as a sapphic queerness as well. But I even think that's a projection to an extent. I think this is a woman who in today's society could easily be read as someone who's on the asexual spectrum. I couldn't help but think that this is a woman who's sex repulsed, and she's trying to navigate a world that is imposing sexuality on her from when she's 5 years old and she's seeing her parents having sex. And it made me think about a book that I read last year by Shawanda Brown called, do you remember?
Refusing Compulsory Sexuality, a Black Asexual Lens on Our Sex-Obsessed Culture.
It reminded me of that book by Shawanda Brown, and I really enjoyed the depiction of it through this movie. I don't think that everyone will pick up on it, because I still think it's somewhat controversial to say that she's asexual, because obviously she wouldn't have identified as that way, right? But I did enjoy seeing that theme. In terms of the things I didn't like, there are some pacing issues in the second and third acts. And the biggest criticism I have is that this movie is supposed to be about Ann Lee, right? But we don't get to know that much about her as a character. It almost feels like I'm watching things happen to her. I'm watching her be brutalized, but I don't see her response to that. We get it when it comes to the pregnancy loss, when it comes to the back-to-back miscarriages and stillbirths, I got it there. But when we see her going to the United States and being brutalized by the American police, I feel like we just lost her as a character, and she just became this historical figure, almost in like a documentary way, and even they're not very good. Another thing worth pointing about this movie is, again, at the center of this is a religious community that have obviously hymns and stuff. So it is a musical, but it's not a standard musical. So the songs here are very short and repetitive. And when I was watching, I was like, this sounds like a hymn. And then when I did my research, it's literally the Shaker hymn. So they're known for having very short, repetitive hymns. And I just thought that was such a lovely touch.
Are they existing hymns, or did they make new ones for the film?
Oh, that I don't know. The other thing I didn't like is that I found the ending to be very weak and abrupt. I think it's because they hadn't dug into a character enough. So I was still waiting for the payoff in terms of, tell me something about what Ann Lee is feeling through all of this. And just when I'm waiting for that, she gets beaten to death, basically. And there's like a really sudden reveal that was just very jarring for me.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but that's historical. Like, that's a fact. So yeah, long story short, overall, I did really love Testament of Ann Lee. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, despite that, because the negatives are big negatives. If this is a movie that's supposed to be about Ann Lee, I should be on her journey. I should be on her emotional journey. Having said that, I love seeing the depiction of a female preacher during this time. I still can't believe that she's a real person. And I did love that Mona Fastforward did focus in on their interior design and architectural pursuits. Because, by the way, a lot of things that we use today are Shaker inventions. Like, these are actually very serious people when it comes to invention.
Do you know, a random bit of lore about me? When I was young, I had this book called Terrific Chocolate, one of these like kid science primer animated books. And I was obsessed with that book. I read that book 100 times. And the Cadbury brothers were Quakers. And the book kind of maps the different entrepreneurs of chocolates in the industrial era in the UK, and kind of highlighted how a lot of them, some of them were mavericks, some of them were awful people, some of them were horrible bosses, but highlighted how actually like wonderful people the Cadbury brothers were for that time. And even now, like, they built entire towns and villages for the workers. They ensured that their workers, unlike other industrial workers at that time, were in a pollution-free environment. Everybody got free education, healthcare. And I remember I really dove into Quaker lore during that time as a child. And I was like, oh, these seem like kind of like the only religious people that are not horrible people. Because the Quakers were also very anti-war and anti-racism and segregation and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, these are the only religious people I've really ever heard about that don't sound like monsters.
That reminds me, actually, there's another key thing to point out here. When she goes to America, now bear in mind, it's worth pointing out that she's still a colonialist, right? Because you left England to go to America to build your community for no reason, and you still took indigenous land. At least she approached it with maybe a more ethical approach than other people, but that's still what it is, right? So I was happy to see the movie handle the indigenous part, but I was waiting for them to handle the African American part, and they did.
Did they?
So we see Black people joining her community, and they seem. I was wondering in the movie, like, you know, are they of a lower status or anything? But we have no evidence to conclude that the Black women that were part of her community were of lower status.
I think that is how the Quakers were, to be fair. Like, I think that is actually kind of historically accurate.
Yeah. So yeah, overall, I was impressed by the movie. I really want to give it at least an 8 out of 10, but I just can't because of the things that didn't go so well. And it's a very damn long movie, just like The Brutalist.
That's one thing about these film festival films, and I experienced this at Cannes too. These artists have so much to say, and so they will just drag it out. Please, like, the edit button is a very positive thing. It makes your work better, to be honest, to be kind of strict with your edit.
So, regards to whether assessment of Annie passes the Bechdel test, of course it does. We have a woman at the center of this movie. She's surrounded by people of all genders, all different backgrounds and such. We see her speaking to plenty of women. We see her commanding men. We see her commanding men to go and build stuff, to command women to go and build stuff. She's a great community leader. So yeah, it passes the Bechdel test with flying colours. Thanks for going deep with us. Like us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you're streaming this from.
Thanks for listening. We'll speak to you next time.